Hey there, welcome again to a video on Dorico. I'm going to be really getting deep in today on expression maps because a few people have requested this topic, and I've been trying to, I've been spending the last few weeks really isolating what the problems were and how I could get at these problems solutions most concisely, because I know that everybody wants quick answers. So here's the problem I think I'm going to address today that I think a lot of people have, is that they might have instruments that, it's not clear how to integrate them into Dorico, but they really need them in their workflow. Maybe it's CSS, maybe it's a Spitfire library, something like that. I'm going to show you how to do that. You may have really unusual or odd articulations that you need to use. It might be something sort of simple like Coleño or something on a string instrument that's fairly common in a sample library, but maybe not fairly commonly used. But it may be something even more unusual, like a particular vocal accent, or a particular grace note on a flute instrument, something very, very particular that obviously Dorico is not going to come packaged with natively. So I'm going to show you how to set that up. And then the sort of final stage is, how do you get this into your notation in a readable way, but also get the playback that you want, so that the notation still stays pretty tidy and clean. So I'm going to try and cover all of that. And I will say that this is going to be probably a little bit of a longer video. Feel free, obviously, to skip through it. But here's the thing, is that this is not an easy thing to just wrap up in like 5 minutes. There are a lot of things going on here. And I think a lot of people, they understand certain parts, and then other parts they don't get at all. And it's like either you get the whole package or it doesn't work. And I want to go through this step by step. I'm not going to labor over details. I want to make it as quick as I can, but I am going to go through it step by step, actually walk through step by step, so that people have the opportunity to fill in the gaps of their knowledge wherever that is, rather than me pinpointing individual stages. I'm going to try and be super, super clear about everything that I'm doing along the way. So I'm going to take myself off the screen here, and I am keeping an eye on my comments. If people have questions, feel free to go ahead and post those. All right, so taking me off the screen here. And what I'm going to start with here in Dorico is I'm going to add a new instrument. Now I'm going to go down to adding a solo player, and that's because I'm going to just be adding a violinist. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this Stradivari violin. This is part of the Cremona Quartet, which comes with, it's from Native Instruments. And it's a good example here because it's got just a load of custom articulations in it. Now it is loaded here automatically. Let's see, did it load? No, it did not. So actually that's a good thing, because I can take you through the steps of getting that set up. I'm going to go with something actually a little more commonplace. Let me go ahead and delete that. And I'm just going to add a solo player again, but this time it's just going to be a straight up violin, because this is where a lot of people would start. Okay, so I'm going to add this is a solo violinist. This is not a section. This is a solo violinist. And I'm going to go ahead and add that. And now the next step is for me to load up my instruments. So the way you do that is up here in VST and MIDI. I'm going to go ahead and delete Halion. I don't need that. I'm going to click this little, click this little plus there for VST instruments. This is a contact instrument, so I got to go to Native Instruments, down to Contact 7, and that's going to eventually load up a little Contact 7 window showing me all of my libraries. This is kind of what I mean by taking this step by step can be a little time consuming. So I'm going to look up Stradivari violin, and I'm just going to open up the default instrument there, and it'll take a second to load. Now as you can see here, with the articulations, you got so many articulations, it's easy here to see that there are going to be things which are not going to be natively supported by Dorico, but I may want to use in my notation, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Okay, so now I've got this VST instrument loaded, but it's not actually connected yet. So once you've loaded the instrument, you have to go into Track Inspector and you have to make sure it's actually selected here. You can also go in and rename it. So I'm going to rename it Strad Violin. So that's very easy for me to see what's going on. You can see that it's on port 4 or channel 4. That's neither here nor there really. What I'm going to do now is just go ahead and check if I have sound. All right, so I have sound. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this window just a little bit. And I'm going to make sure that this is open over here so that it's really easy for us easy for anybody watching this video to follow along. Okay, so this is how you load an instrument. Hopefully everybody knows that. This is the first step. The next step is you want to actually create an expression map. I'm going to just go through the process of setting up one articulation, and we're going to set up a custom playing technique, and we're going to make sure that it's all connected up, and I'm going to actually write in notation using the custom playing technique so that you can see how that works. Let me take myself off the screen again. So let's say that coming over here again, I'm going to want to use something a little less common. So maybe for this one, I'm just going to choose sustain. And for this one here, I'm going to use, I don't know, ricochet, just because it's not, this is not common, right? So I've got ricochet and I've got sustain. So I'm going to want at some point to have both in my notation. So let's just say that I put in a little melody here. Like that. And right now I'm getting all ricochet. You can hear that. And sometimes I want sustain, which would sound like this. Sometimes I'm going to want ricochet. So I'm going to go ahead, and repeat that. I just hit the R, and that repeats it. And so what I want to do is have some way in my notation of saying, well, these are sustains, these are natural, and these are ricochet. So in order to do that, I need to go into the library menu here, and I need to go to Playback Techniques. Playback techniques are basically things that will trigger a particular thing in your library. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new technique, and I'm going to call it ricochet. I want to make sure I keep this spelling just so that it's very clear. So I'm going to put in, I'm creating this playback technique. This is the first step, and it's going to be direction. That means that it is going to take effect until something else. I could turn it into attribute, which means it has to actually be assigned to each instrument. I may choose that here because ricochet would be less common. Sometimes it can be frustrating if you use direction. You do have to manually, in your score, say later on, okay, now I want to leave spiccato and go back to détaché or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit attribute. You can still assign this to multiple notes without having to have it in your score several times. I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to create this playback techniques. It really was that simple, but I don't see anything yet, right? So over here, I don't have in my techniques anything called ricochet, and that's because I don't have a playing technique. So playback technique is basically just a name of what the plugin needs to do. Playing technique is where we're going to say what thing in the score it means fire that or trigger that, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create a new one here. I'm going to call this ricochet. This is the next step. And you can change the text here if you ever wanted to. I could do that, and then it changes the text that displays. I'm going to go ahead and leave that as is. You can write in what you'd want to look for in the popover, the J popover, or the articulations popover if you wanted to. And then you can choose the playback technique here, which now, because I've added it, I should see ricochet in this list. So there it is. I'm going to go ahead and choose that. Now I actually see that there's 2 ricochets. So I am curious where so there's a ricochet in lengths, and there's a ricochet, the one that I created was in techniques. So it looks like there was actually, at this particular example, there was already this playback technique built in. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the one that I had put in, which was attribute in under techniques, because I don't want to have duplicates. That would be messy. I'm going to go to the one that does exist already in lengths. That's also attribute, so that's cool. This way, when I come to this playback technique, there's not 2 ricochets. I don't have to worry about if I'm choosing the right one. So let me just go ahead and back out of there. Sometimes these lists don't refresh. So where was I? I was setting up ricochet, and I'm hoping now that I've refreshed it. Yes, there's only 1 ricochet now. So I'm going to choose that ricochet. We know that that's in the lengths. And here is also something cool. So if you wanted this attribute to be visibly continued over a series of notes, you can do this here. I will show you how that works. So that's the second step, is after you set up the playback technique so that you can look it up in this drop-down box, you then create a playing technique, which will actually show up in your score. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now we can see up here in my regular old playing techniques list, there is a ricochet. And I could either go ahead and select a note and put ricochet there, or I could have that note selected and hit Shift P for playing techniques, and then type in ricochet, and I'll find that there as well. Either way, it's exactly the same thing. It just depends on what kind of workflow you prefer. All right, so now we probably aren't triggering anything yet. So we've got it showing up in our notation, but it is not actually triggering anything, and we have to look at why. That's where the expression map comes in. So in the expression map, what we're doing is we're saying this instrument should respond in this way to these things in the notation, or playing techniques. So playing techniques should do this in this instrument. You have to have an expression map that pertains to that instrument. So I'm going to show you how to do that. This is the next step. All right, take myself off, and we're going to go to the play mode now. And we are going to go over here to expression map. It's got default setup. I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to click that little icon. And I'm going to go down to the bottom here, and I'm going to create a new one called Music Chef. And this one's going to be called Ricochet Demo. Let's just call it that. But you might, to call it something maybe more realistic, I might call this, Strad Violin or something like that. All right, and then when I hit OK, it's going to show up in this expression map drop-down box all the way at the bottom here. So there it is. You can see Music Chef Strad Violin. Make sure that is selected for your instrument. But right now, it's still not doing anything because there's nothing in that expression map. So it still doesn't know what to do with ricochet. We can see, by the way, if we go into the key editor and we look at these notes, we can see that there's no indication yet. They're all marked as natural. There's no indication in the playing techniques lane in the key editor that these notes should be using different things. And that's because there's nothing in our expression map. The playing technique is showing you what the expression map has recognized, not showing you what's possible or what's necessarily in your notation. So that can be a little confusing. So we're going to go and we're going to make sure that this now knows what to do. So we've got our new Strad Violin thing set up here. Of course, you always want to have init. That's going to be, basically, I might just go with C1, so we can see C1 over here is my sustain. So I might just go ahead and add that in there. Accidentally put in a CC. Let me go ahead and put in a key switch. So I'm going to go ahead and put in C1. And so in it, we're always going to start on sustained finger. Natural, we also want that to be sustained finger, so I'm going to go ahead and hit C1. Sometimes these C1, C2, they can actually be offset by 1 octave. So if you set up a key switch and it doesn't work, that might be because the library uses, you know, C2 or C3, and that's what this middle, or this is what this middle note, middle C selector is for. So if you set this up and you know you've matched it, still not working, you might just be 1 octave off. I can't remember right now what's going on with contact, but I'm hoping that I'm getting it right. And if I'm not, then all the better for you guys, because you'll get to see me demo fixing that. Okay, but we still need ricochet. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to be able to find ricochet now. It's right there. Because we added as a playback technique, you can see this window is actually listing playback techniques. Not playing techniques, playback. Playback are things that are going to trigger your instrument. Playing is things that are in your notation. So I hit that, and now I can say what I want ricochet to do. I'm going to actually want that to play key switch D1. Okay, so ricochet is going to do D1, and natural is going to do C1. And now, when we go back and play it, we should see that change. So there's a bit of difference there. You can see that the first note here is marked as ricochet, but not the subsequent notes. Why is that? That is because back in my playing techniques, or actually, I'm sorry, back in playback techniques, the thing that triggers the instrument, ricochet, which I believe was under lengths, is set as attribute. If I set it as direction, we'll see that it actually would apply to all the instruments. You see how it's changed now. It applies until I say do something else. But there's, in my view, personally, a better way of doing this, which is to set ricochet to attribute. I'm going to go ahead and just do this quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and set that to attribute again. And we can see that it's done that. But what I want to do is I'm going to hold down Option and Shift, and you get this little bar that you could, essentially shows you which notes. And you can see down here in the playing techniques lane how it's expanding and contracting the range that ricochet applies. When you hold down Option and Shift and you use the right left arrows like this, you are expanding the range of this attribute. It's also a tool that if you had a note selected and you hold down Option and Shift, it actually lengthens the note by whatever is selected down here in your grid, right here, this little drop down box. So that's just kind of like a side tip. Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and turn that back into a quarter note. But I want ricochet to run on this whole measure. I'm going to go ahead and take that off, and maybe just for the fun of it, take that off and go ahead and bring that over here. This is just kind of to expand on what's possible. Adding a little space in there with a rest makes it so we can hear the ricochet. And now if we watch this, it's going to actually switch from sustained finger to ricochet as we play. Like that. And if we were to have this note, this measure over here, repeat it again, we see that it picks up natural because the ricochet is an attribute playback technique, and we only have this line over the top. If you don't see this actual physical line, that is something that you can curate back in library playing techniques. And if you look at the ricochet here and you go to the continuation, this is what this means. If I had none, it wouldn't show a line. If you wanted to change the line, maybe I want it to be a dashed line. I hit OK. now you can see that it's a dashed line. So you can customize how those look as well. It still works the same way with Option and Shift held down. I'm using left and right arrows to decide what the range of that influence is. So this gives you, hopefully, a very clear sense of how you can get the expression map from scratch to trigger the appropriate things in your instruments. This can be hard to do over and over again. If you got an instrument like this that's got dozens of different variations, maybe you want them with or without release samples. Maybe you want soft attack and hard attack, and it can be like, you know, it's not easy. I would not make the claim that this is easy, but it is possible. It's very reliable if you understand expression maps, playing techniques, playback techniques, and you know how to troubleshoot them by looking down here in this playing technique lane. That's a godsend, really, a really important tool for people who are working on this. Next time, I'm going to dive into a different aspect of expression maps. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments, and please like and subscribe to the video if you found it useful. And I am always open to feedback and questions as well. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again next time. All right, bye for now.